2016 is a low-budget action movie made in Ghana, where its director, a man known only as Ninja, rolled it out during the same time they made a very localized version of Devil May Cry. And though the film was popularized on YouTube by this trailer in 2011 that suggested a feature-length series of ridiculous action scenes animated by Tim and Eric, the full movie is actually just scenes of static guys standing still and kind of talking in the middle of the frame. So it's pretty much a Star Wars prequel, 8.8 out of 10. In real life, 2016 played out shocking events on a backdrop of celebrity deaths. A Turkish military coup prompted the government to purge everyone it doesn't like. South Korea was under control of cultist weirdos, Britain doesn't want free trade and free travel anymore, and the USA voted into presidency a sleazy reality TV celebrity who bragged about getting away with sexual assault and tax evasion in front of everyone on national television.
He didn't pay any federal income tax. So
that makes
if
me
he's
smart.
paid zero.
In the pseudo-pretend luxury sphere of video games, the Wii U's life cycle is almost at an end with a stagnated lineup of like 2 incredibly niche releases, because Nintendo is rather focusing on the Switch launching in like a couple months. The upcoming release of 2 new backwards-compatible half-step consoles represents what may be the lowest generational leap in fidelity since, well, the last one. If you can even call the Pro and the Scorpio a new generation at all. But that doesn't annoy me too much, because the only people who should really feel pressured into buying a new console soon are also the people with enough spending money to be buying other high-end early adopted tech that actually makes use of it. 4K TVs and VR headsets. 2016 also saw decreased revenue among a lot of the anticipated AAA sequels, a trend that also doesn't annoy me too much because it should come as a harsh wake-up call, perhaps hinting at the long-awaited eventual decrease in consumer confidence following years of day one DLC, exploitive bonus content practices, and now withheld early reviews, which, surprise surprise, correlates to AAA sequels everyone expected to be bad actually ending up being pretty good, as well as more companies adopting more generous policies. We have Steam refunds now. I guess you can call me an optimist for once. I'm coming away from No Man's Sky with that same hope. That game's disappointing reception blew up into such a scandal that I honestly find it hard to imagine the usual amount of bizarre reverence for unreleased games to happen again within the next, say, at least 2 years. No Man's Sky is a very familiar story that seems to keep happening, but the sheer minutiae that fans roasted away the promises behind it made that episode of overhyped gaming feel like some kind of season finale. Gamers are easily separated from their wallets, but maybe now that's set to change. We're going through a disruptive period of an unusually short half-step generation, but all in all, I don't think that really translated into a very bad year for gaming. 2016 may have been a shitty year for the real world, but for games, it was alright. It was decent. Which makes me want to focus on the good more than the bad. The first positive parable is that VR is finally happening. And it's about time. Almost half a decade passed between the Kickstarter for the Oculus Rift and its eventual launch, and along the way the concept of VR has turned from headsets being an elaborate replacement for monitors into this elaborate rat's nest of extra cables and cameras and the ever-present motion-activated hand controllers. Games made from the ground up for VR are genuinely incompatible with the old methods, creating and normalizing new control schemes, new camera methods, and entire new genres of game. One of which that has already caught on is the ubiquitous room puzzle, with developers working to see how many different spins they can turn one screen of old point-and-click adventure puzzling into something far more immersive, tactile, and complex. The Rift launched in March and the HTC Vive launched in April, but the unlikely competitor that convinced me was the PlayStation VR, which launched in October. And though things may look a little blurrier and a little more jittery in that headset, the reason it became my favorite over a drunken weekend spent with it was the sheer freight train of quality that is first-party Sony-funded game development. It makes what's happening on the PC headsets look like experiments in comparison, with mainstream-ready quality that I immediately noticed at the firing range of the London Heist demo, where everything just looked and felt a lot more like the AAA quality blockbuster killer apps that VR has desperately been needing. For the first time, playing VR games felt like playing the radically new and boldly innovative polygonal 3D games of the mid-90s. After confirming that I wasn't feeling the motion sickness everyone complains about, I got really excited about this stuff. I've been waiting for one high-quality killer app to prod me into finally buying one of these things, and I think Resident Evil 7 may be that deal breaker. Because a lot of traditional action games still seem to be stagnating and becoming less interactive as time goes on, and VR feels like a cure to that. Without VR, RE7 looks like it may end up just playing like a 5-year-old Half-Life mod, but your most basic inputs really get taken to the next level of increasing interactivity with elegance thanks to VR, where controlling your aim with your face means that panicking in real life makes you panic in the game. It means you have to look at and confront all the spooky little cues that hint at the incoming jump scares. Even though the game wasn't built from the ground up for VR, doing stuff like sticking your face into cabinets for ammo and slowly peeking around the next corner feel like a natural fit. It would feel like a disservice playing it without VR. That confidence to push VR forward fast with elaborate franchises and expensive high-quality releases is a push we still haven't really seen on the PC side, where even the most promising projects still make for a pretty hard sale when you're just watching a video of it. But confidence and quality can be seen all over the PSVR lineup, where it feels like VR is finally ready to hit the mainstream, with demos like the Battlefront X-Wing mission, Batman VR, London Heist, Res Infinite, and 360-degree date with Ren Ishikawa.
So what's George? What's scarier, this or Resident Evil?
This.
Yeah.
There is nothing scarier than talking to cute girls. Back in 2007, I remember reading an editorial predicting that Portal would be the Super Mario 64 of first-person shooters, and that was wrong. The real answer was Modern Warfare 1, which established the rules, trends, and pacing for a decade of shooters too afraid to change until just now, apparently. The Call of Duty bubble has burst. This year's sequel launched with 50% less sales than last year's sequel, which also sold lower than the one before it, which means developers now have a motive to get weird with everyone's genre fatigue. And the AAA's response is a burst of nostalgia-fueled energy, making FPS games faster, more likable, and more endearing than they've been in the past decade. FPS games have colors again, they have fun fantasy settings again, they have characters who appeal again. Hell, even if they do have an old gray historical setting, they'll still pick an underutilized one and try to have some fun with it. FPS games have depth and difficulty in their movement systems again. Even Halo has you dash boosting and crouch sliding to factor in a whole bunch of other variables determining who wins the gunfight other than who spots who first. Wall running all over some ridiculous sci-fi future palace has now become your basic method of transportation in the past 3 years of Call of Duty, but Titanfall has stolen that spotlight with a campaign of high-energy levels that almost feel like slapstick comedy sets. They're levels that are also designed to be skied through with a bunch of speedrunning tricks that turn them into tunnels resembling the old Source Engine bunny hopping courses. Compared to 2009's most basic cinematic cover shooters, FPS campaigns of this year don't stop often for cutscenes. In fact, across a lot of these recent campaigns, you don't do a lot of waiting around for people to talk before they unlock a door for you. The one time this does happen in Titanfall 2, you definitely feel its pacing slow down. What best exemplifies this strange 10-year gap in FPS creativity is Doom 2016, which is what I guess I'll call it right now. It ended up being a more faithful Doom sequel than 2004's Doom 3. It learned lessons from 13 years ago to eventually apply them now. Overwatch feels like a natural progression forwards from the Team Arena class shooters of Quake engine mods that largely stopped looking and feeling like this at Team Fortress 2, while probably the one least nostalgic FPS favorite of the year, Superhot, still had me in love for a couple weeks with a short but sweet exploration of a fresh new FPS mechanic. Bethesda really didn't want to take the chance of any reviewers sapping sales away from their games as launches. Even though Doom and Dishonored 2 ended up reviewing very well, Doom in particular seemed doomed from the start. With an E3 demo that played nothing like the final game and a multiplayer beta that only showed things that the final game wasn't about. Plus, that's without all the neat little features that subsequent patches added in later. Expectations were low and then were shattered. This happened with Hitman, with Rainbow Six Siege, and Watch Dogs 2, and a couple years earlier with Shadow of Mordor. More and more games are defying expectations by basically setting customers up with low expectations. Which I think means two things. Further evidence that creativity and taking willing risks are driving game design more than they were 5 years ago, and that our old expectations are actually becoming obsolete. And that an increased lack of consumer confidence resulting in lower sales, resulting in greater cynicism, has resulted in greater chances of being pleasantly surprised. I mean, when the bar's set low, a thing doesn't have to leap very high to pass it, right? Which brings me to my own personal weird problem of selecting the Super Bunny Hop Super Legit Game of the Year. I'm hamstrung by the caveat that nothing I played this year really truly gave me the butterflies in the stomach that an Undisputed Game of the Year really does, but that is my own fault based on the lineup that I did play. I think I just ended up happening to play a lot of the lesser of the best games of 2016, if that makes any sense. It has to do with my platform of preference and the unfortunate economic motives of playing games to review on a YouTube channel. I focused mainly on big Western PC releases this year, and that doesn't seem to be where the cream of the crop was this time. Because while I saw a lot of friends genuinely enjoying and having unconditional, good, clean, no-strings-attached, guilt-free fun with games like Dragon Quest Builders, Fury, Valhalla, Stardew Valley, and the Odin Sphere remake, a lot of the games I ended up reviewing positively did come attached with conditions. I'm gonna list 3 games I really enjoyed, but don't know if any one of them deserves unchecked praise. Keep in mind, this is just the unfortunate reality of the games I did decide to put on the schedule to play from beginning to end multiple times, in depth and slowly enough for a full quality review. Loving the new Hitman is hard for me to do. It plays exactly like it should, hell, maybe even better than every other game in the series, and its focus on trial and error perfectionist stealth challenges is so far up my no-trank, non-lethal European extreme-ass alley that I was grinning from ear to ear through every level of this thing. That wealth of extra challenges and bonus missions means that every level, as huge as they already are, truly get used to their full extent. What seem like filler areas and odd curios end up becoming robust, well-utilized mechanics later on. The humor, grace, and style of Hitman acting like James Bond makes for a deliciously campy but classy aesthetic, but it's a single-player game with always online DRM that's probably the first one truly good enough to get away with it. It has no reason to be an online game, but publishers are going to use its success as an excuse to argue that customers are truly engaging on a positive outcome to Square Enix's new live experiences. It allows news stories of them slowly releasing these ridiculous restraints to take a positive spin, even when they haven't fully patched in an offline mode and fixed this problem. Meanwhile, me talking about this game always ends up with an argument about another deal breaker, the elusive targets. I started off just with mixed feelings about this concept, but now after missing a few of them, I just hate it. The difference between the temporary content of an elusive target going away in 1 week versus a seasonal online event is that an elusive target is narrative-driven content. This isn't just cosmetic stuff. An elusive target is a funny and interesting new character with their own intro movies, their own stories, and oftentimes they call for the level to be redesigned a bit for their own sake. So, if you get hit by a truck and end up in the hospital, if you have a big project at work for a week, if you have to go visit the relatives and you miss your deadline, too bad, Gary Busey's gone forever. Even if those tragic events don't happen to you, here's a much more likely scenario. You just miss them. You don't pay attention to the news that week. You don't install the Square Enix Hitman Notification Fun app on your phone to get reminded about them. If you don't take some extra steps to intrude the game into your real life, you pretty much have to launch the game client and look at the elusive target box to know if one's coming up or not. This makes me salty for 2 big reasons. Number 1, I'm a consumer advocate. I want to advocate for games to have the most use value possible for the lowest price tag possible. I want a good deal when I buy a game, and making single-player content expire on a deadline is a move that actively counters against patient consumers waiting for games to become cheaper over time. Number 2 is that this is a single-player game. It's its own self-contained universe. Planet Earth wobbles on an axis around the sun. It makes sense for things to expire and go away in real life. Why do they gotta do it here? Elusive target missions can take up to 2 hours. I don't want to schedule appointments and race against time deadlines for a level in a single-player video game. I play video games to escape those kind of obligations. Loving Hitman just stresses me out. I want to give shoutouts. I want to give mad respect to the first 2 weeks of Pokemon Go. Not the game itself, nor the experience of what it's like to play after those 2 weeks, though it would have been nice if everyone kept that momentum going. It also would have been impossible. Because people came out in droves for those first 2 weeks, a huge mainstream audience of people, and those crowds made the mainstream fad of Pokemon Go a fundamentally different game than what came after. During that initial rush of players, it was a dream come true. The Pokemon universe was made real with camps of competing teams cropping up in the parks, people actually hunting out in the woods to catch Pokemon, and kids looking up to unbeatable gym leaders. Before 2016 really got into full negative swing, I was still a happy person because of the first 2 weeks of Pokemon Go. You can't make this stuff up. In the future, we're gonna look back at 2016 and be like, man, What kind of magic was that? Anyway, of course that was before the honeymoon wore off and everyone collectively realized how shallow the gameplay of the cell phone app actually was. Getting one basic gesture down as you relied on RNGesus while making sure to only take walks through dense population areas was about all there was to it. On the other hand, getting your foot in the door of new cliques, showing up to pub crawls and park meetups, and learning how to talk to strangers about stupid nerdy video game bullshit and shouting jokes at people across parking lots, that stuff had depth and complexity and challenge. So if large groups of people could count as a game of the year, I'd give it to the entire player base of Pokemon Go in a heartbeat, under the condition that that really only lasted for the first 2 weeks. I have 300 hours in Rainbow Six Siege. I played it more than any other game this year. I loved it more than any other game this year. It's something I swear by and thoroughly believe in and have little to no complaints about, and the reason why it's at the bottom of this list is really just because it came out in 2015. December 2015, so it missed the deadline by 1 month. But 2016 was the year Siege really got going, and I think the rise of Siege is also one of the greatest success stories of the year, and the poster child for this wacky trend of games being marketed terribly ending up terrifically. Over 2016, Ubisoft fixed up Siege's issues with netcode and hit detection, they rolled out a pretty solid anti-cheat program, gave it an esports push, and a whole expansion's worth of new content supported by a $15 season pass that can be pretty quickly bypassed for free after about 6 to 8 hours of playing the game at a regular, normal, enjoyable pace. A huge flux of new players didn't just realize how great of a game it actually is, they also realized they could give it heart and soul. I believe these little chibi figurines had a lot to do with that, in addition to the characters just having good designs. But an onslaught of fan art and inside jokes made Siege even more of an adorable anomaly. Nowadays, the lead designer is retweeting an endless amount of fan art of cute girls, and who the hell would suspect that was for a tough-nosed, modern military Western FPS like Siege, let alone one that launched with a misleading trailer, a laundry list of known shippable bugs, all on the back of Ubisoft's terrible reputation. It had an impossibly steep mountain to climb, but by the end of the year, they actually scaled it. But actually, hold up, real talk. The Super Bunny Hop Super Legit Game of the Year is 360-degree date with Ren Ishikawa.
This is how Japan is solving their nobody's dating problem.
Yeah, with give up machines.
Who's playing that piano?
Is my name Nanka? Liam, this is getting boring.
How did you trick her into thinking you know Japanese? Did she see your video and ask to go on a date with you?
Very good.
Okay.